had to say about this offer, as she absolutely slammed it. This is what Breanna Stewart had to say, man. Time is of the essence. Stewart added that she doesn't know if there's a drop dead date, at which point the league will no longer be able to start the season on time if there's no CBA in place. However, she made it clear that everyone knows they're running out of time and need to get a deal done soon. I think that both sides are very aware that this has gone on way longer than it needed to, Stewart said, but hopefully we can really start hearing each other. And
that sound you are hearing right now, that is the absolute, undeniable sound of a high-stakes negotiation slamming full force into a brick wall. We're talking about WNBPA Vice President Breanna Stewart, who just stepped up to the mic and made it crystal clear to the entire world that the league's latest collective bargaining agreement proposal isn't just insufficient. It's not even moving the needle on the one thing that actually matters to the players: revenue sharing.
Man, oh man, it appears these WNBA players, they are nuts. They are absolutely insane, and they are continuing to try to play hardball with these WNBA owners in regards to the latest CBA offer made by the owners. Breanna Stewart absolutely slapped around that last offer. Denied. We have to get into it. Welcome to Keep the Vision. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share the channel, hit that bell notification to hype the video for me as well. It will be greatly appreciated. Now, we continue to follow what's going on.
The owners came to the table and threw in everything but the kitchen sink, including housing concessions, major facility upgrades, and a salary cap raise to $5.65 million for 2026. And Stewart's response, basically, thanks, but no thanks. She is drawing a hard line here, saying that the players want their specific cut of the revenue pie, and until they get that, everything else the league offers is just window dressing designed to distract from the real issue. You have to understand that this isn't just about money, it's about power and partnership.
It being a large contingent of WNBA players is a key point. There's a large contingent of WNBA players playing in Athletes Unlimited, not Unrivaled, not Project B. They're not making a bunch of money right now playing basketball in Athletes Unlimited. This is just to get some conditioning, get some 5-on-5 in, and things of that nature. This is not something where you are going to fatten your pockets. So ultimately, the players in this league, these are those middle of the pack players who seem to be getting left out in thought by the veterans, the Nneka Ogwumike's, the Breanna Stewarts, the Napheesa Colliers, who are all compromised but also can afford a lockout. These players, majority of these players in Athletes Unlimited, cannot afford a WNBA.
The players are looking at these offers and saying, that's nice, but it's not equity, and that distinction is fueling this entire rejection. And let me tell you, this isn't just standard negotiating posturing, where one side acts tough to get a better deal. This is a fundamental, deep-rooted disagreement about how professional basketball should actually operate in the year 2025. The scary part, with training camp supposed to kick off in less than 3 months, both sides are rapidly running out of runway to land this plane safely, and the panic is starting to set in.
Jay Melbourne and a bunch of Australian players who said they could not afford a WNBA lockout, and that's not what they wanted. I been knew y'all wasn't on the same page. Here it says, the WNBA's proposal, the league's first response to the players' latest offer, which came more than 6 weeks ago, didn't move much money-wise, Stewart said, but there were some minimum standard requirements that did come into play. That was important, Stewart added, because that means that the league heard us on things that matter to us. And it also means that the league and the owners have been willing to compromise. We are still waiting to hear what you players have compromised on. We haven't heard it yet. Notably, the league's latest proposal offered concessions on player housing and facility standards. First-year players and players on minimum salary will be provided a one-bedroom apartment for the first 3 years of the CBA, while developmental players...
Now, let's zoom out and really follow what is going on here, because the timeline is absolutely critical to understanding the severity of this mess. The WNBA owners sent their latest proposal on Friday, which was more than 6 weeks after receiving the players' last offer. Think about that. 6 weeks of radio silence. That is not the pace of a productive back-and-forth negotiation. That is the pace of two sides digging trenches and preparing for a long, ugly war of attrition.
However, the league's response did not address the gap between the sides on revenue sharing, though it did raise the salary cap to $5.65 million in 2026. A source familiar with the negotiation told CBS Sports how that rise would affect specific salaries is unclear. The WNBA's proposal in early December offered a $5 million salary cap and a max salary of about $1.3 million in the first year of the deal. A source close to the situation told CBS Sports that over the course of the proposed deal, the maximum salary will raise to almost $2 million, and that multiple players on each team will be eligible for the max salary. The minimum salary in this deal would start at $230,000. The average would start at $530,000. Now, hear what Breanna.
The situation is so intense that the players had to hold an emergency executive committee call on Sunday just to discuss the proposal. And according to Stewart, the first order of business on that call wasn't even analyzing the financial details of the offer itself. Instead, it was about getting everyone on the same page about what they are even asking for in the first place, which frankly tells you something incredibly important. There are cracks forming in the united front, and the union might not be as cohesive as they want us to believe.
Hear us on things that are non-negotiables. What are the non-negotiables? For them, it has been revenue sharing. They want 30% of revenue share. The WNBA is refusing to move on that. This is what you have to pay attention to in this entire thing. Right here. Right there. Revenue sharing. The owners have compromised on many, many things. We haven't seen anything the players have compromised on. The one thing the owners have stayed steady on is revenue sharing. We cannot go up to 30%. We absolutely will not. In fact, we can't go above this 15, but we are giving everyone more money. We are going to continue to pay for you guys' housing, which we didn't want to do. We're going to give on a lot of things. Breanna Stewart absolutely slammed that offer and basically said, look, all of that, the housing, all of the little things, yeah, that's cool. I don't care about keychains and trinkets. We care about revenue share. And therefore, this deal is denied.
See, the WNBPA has been projecting this image of unshakable solidarity since December, but we've seen the cracks starting to show. Remember, we have seen Australian players like Jade Melbourne go on the record and publicly state that they literally cannot afford a lockout. Then you have rookie Baylor Kelly admitting on camera with real concern in her voice that she is scared about losing her paycheck. These aren't the seasoned veterans with massive overseas contracts and seven-figure endorsement deals we're talking about here.
And everybody was on the same page, but we found out that that was a lie, and there is a fracture, which I already knew about because I put out videos in December and November with Deja Kelly saying she didn't want to lock out with.
These are the middle-tier players, the grinders who need their WNBA salaries just to survive and pay rent. And right now, they are watching superstars like Breanna Stewart, Nneka Ogwumike, and Napheesa Collier, all of whom have lucrative deals with Athletes Unlimited or Unrivaled, dictate a high-risk negotiating strategy that could cost the average player absolutely everything. It's a terrifying position to be in when your financial future is being gambled by people who have a much bigger safety net than you do. And here is what makes that recent Athletes Unlimited meeting so incredibly revealing. You had Nneka Ogwumike, the WNBPA president herself, flying all the way to Nashville specifically to check in with players competing in that league. Note that she didn't fly to check on Unrivaled, where the top-tier players are making 6 figures for an 8-week season. She went to Athletes Unlimited, where players are competing for much more modest payouts and just trying to get their conditioning reps in. These are the forgotten players in this high-stakes negotiation, the silent majority who aren't making headlines. They are the ones who aren't getting those flashy, unrivaled contracts, and they certainly aren't the ones making 7 figures playing in Turkey or China. For them, the WNBA is everything. They are the ones who genuinely, desperately need the WNBA season to happen exactly on schedule because it represents their primary source of income. And what Ogwumike heard in that meeting, according to multiple sources, is exactly what you would expect to hear. Fear, frustration, and a growing sinking sense that the superstars leading these negotiations don't fully understand what a lockout would actually mean for the rank-and-file members of the union. Because let's be real, when you are Breanna Stewart with a massive, unrivaled contract, huge endorsement deals with Puma and other major brands, and the ability to command top dollar overseas, missing a WNBA season is an inconvenience. It's annoying, but you'll be fine. But when you are a second-year player fighting tooth and nail just for a roster spot, a lockout isn't an inconvenience, it is potentially career-ending. Now we need to pop the hood and talk about what the owners actually offered, because this is where the narrative gets really interesting. The proposal explicitly includes one-bedroom apartments for first-year players and those making the minimum salary for the first 3 years of the CBA, with developmental players getting studio apartments. That might sound like a basic requirement, but it is actually a significant concession because the league has been pushing back hard for years on continuing to provide housing at all. To see them not only keep it but codify it for specific groups is a win that shouldn't be overlooked. And then look at the money. The salary cap rises to a massive $5.65 million in 2026. Maximum salaries would climb to approximately $1.3 million in year one of the deal, eventually reaching nearly $2 million by the end of the contract. Plus, multiple players per team would become eligible for these max contracts. The minimum salary starts at $230,000 and the average salary starts at $530,000. Those are real tangible numbers that represent substantial increases over everything in the current CBA. For context, just look at where we are now. The current maximum salary is hovering around $240,000. So we are talking about a more than five-fold increase in what the top players can earn. That is an explosive jump in earning potential. And don't forget the floor. The current minimum is roughly $60,000. Under this proposal, that is jumping all the way to $230,000. These aren't just token gestures or inflation adjustments. These are transformative raises that would change the lives of the majority of players in the league overnight. But here is the stumbling block, and Stewart states it explicitly in that clip we saw. None of that massive pile of money addresses the revenue-sharing gap. The players are fixated on getting 30% of the league's revenue, while the owners are holding firm at around 15%, even though they are willing to drastically increase total compensation through these higher salaries and benefits. This is the philosophical divide that is sitting at the very heart of this entire standoff. The owners are effectively saying, look, we will pay you more money, significantly more money, but we are not going to tie it to a revenue percentage because this league still isn't consistently profitable. Meanwhile, the players are shouting back, we don't care about your accounting tricks or your balance sheets. They are demanding the same deal that NBA players have, which is roughly 50% of basketball-related income. But the glaring problem with the players' position here is that the WNBA's financial situation isn't even remotely comparable to the NBA's juggernaut economy. The NBA prints money, the WNBA has operated at a loss for most of its existence. You have to remember that the 2024 season, which was driven almost entirely by the Caitlin Clark effect on ratings and attendance, was reportedly the first time the league even approached break-even status. Multiple teams still lose money annually, and the business model heavily depends on NBA subsidies and the willingness of owners to absorb losses as they try to build the brand. So, the owners aren't being unreasonable or greedy when they say, we can't commit to giving you 30% of revenue when we're not even sure there will be positive revenue to share. What they are offering instead is a safety net of guaranteed salary increases that put real money in players' pockets, regardless of whether the league turns a profit or not. But Stewart and the WNBPA leadership simply aren't interested in that framework. They view it as the owners trying to control the narrative and the accounting books. If you tie compensation to revenue sharing, the theory goes, it forces ownership to actually prioritize growing the business because their labor costs automatically scale with their success. This has gone on way longer than it needed to. That is a direct quote from Breanna Stewart about these negotiations, and honestly, she hit the nail on the head. She is not wrong about the timeline. We are dangerously close to the edge here. Let's look at the calendar. The current CBA expires in October. Free agency is supposed to open in January 2026. Training camps typically start in late April. We are now sitting here in February 2025, and the two sides are still fundamentally miles apart on the core economic structure. Stewart says she doesn't know if there's a drop-dead date where starting the season on time becomes impossible, but let's be real. Everyone involved in professional sports knows exactly how this works. If there's no deal by late March, teams can't plan their training camps. If there's no deal by early April, free agency gets delayed. If there's no deal by mid-April, you are looking at either starting late or canceling games entirely. And here is what Stewart reveals in that final statement that you really need to pay attention to. Hopefully we can really start hearing each other. And they hear us on things that are non-negotiables. Translation: the players have drawn a line in the sand on revenue sharing, and they are absolutely not moving off it. Everything else, the housing, the facilities, the minimum standards, that is all just nice to have stuff to them. But the non-negotiable, the hill they are willing to die on, is getting that revenue percentage. The owners have now compromised on multiple fronts to try and get a deal done. They agreed to continue paying for housing despite initially resisting it. They have increased the salary cap significantly. They have raised minimum salaries nearly fourfold. They have made multiple players per team eligible for maximum contracts. They have improved facility standards and working conditions. What have the players compromised on? That is the question Stewart can't seem to answer, because from where we are sitting, the answer appears to be absolutely nothing. They started at 30% revenue sharing, and they are still at 30% revenue sharing. They have accepted some of the ancillary benefits the owners offered, sure, but on the core economic issue, there has been zero movement from the WNBPA side. They are standing like statues on this point, refusing to budge even an inch. This is where the conflict of interest becomes impossible to ignore. We have to address the elephant in the room. Breanna Stewart has a lucrative contract with Unrivaled, the 3-on-3 league co-founded by her and Nafisa Collier. Nika Ogumake, the WNBPA president, also plays in Unrivaled. Nafisa Collier, another executive committee member, literally owns part of Unrivaled. These are the three players driving this hardline negotiating strategy that could result in a WNBA lockout. And think about what happens if the WNBA season gets delayed or canceled. Unrivaled suddenly becomes the primary domestic option for women's professional basketball. Athletes Unlimited gains massive leverage. The alternative leagues that these executives have financial stakes in suddenly become much more important to the entire ecosystem. Now, I'm not saying Stewart, Ogwum, and Collier are deliberately sabotaging WNBA negotiations just to benefit their own business interests. That would be a massive accusation. But I am saying the optics are absolutely terrible. And I am saying that players like Baylor Kelly, who don't have unrivaled contracts or ownership stakes, have to be watching the situation and wondering if their union leadership is really representing their interests, or if they are pursuing an agenda that benefits a small group of elites at the top. The owners have made this point repeatedly in background conversations with media. They feel like they are negotiating with a union leadership that has direct financial incentives to see the WNBA weaken relative to competitor leagues. That doesn't mean the players' demands are invalid, but it complicates everything. It means there is a legitimate question about whether the WNBPA's negotiating position reflects what's best for all 400-plus players in the league, or if it's tailored to what's best for the 30 players who have alternative income sources. Stewart's rejection of this latest offer makes that tension explicit and undeniable. The owners came back with real money, real increases, and real improvements to working conditions. And the response from union leadership was essentially not good enough, because you didn't give us the one thing we really want, which is a percentage of revenue that they can leverage regardless of whether the league is actually profitable or not. Here is the reality check that needs to happen immediately. The WNBA is not the NBA. It doesn't generate billions in revenue. It doesn't have a 50-year track record of profitability. It doesn't command the same media rights fees or sponsorship dollars. Demanding the same revenue-sharing structure as the NBA when the underlying economics are completely different isn't a negotiating position, it's a fantasy. What the owners are offering is substantial, guaranteed money that doesn't depend on creative accounting or rosy revenue projections that might never happen. A $230,000 minimum salary is life-changing for players who are currently making $60,000. A $1.3 million maximum salary climbing to $2 million puts WNBA stars in the same financial conversation as professional athletes in other major women's sports leagues globally. But Stewart and the WNBPA leadership have decided that is not enough. They want the revenue percentage, and they are willing to risk a lockout to get it, which means they are willing to risk the financial security of hundreds of players who can't afford to miss paychecks. They are doing all this in pursuit of a negotiating principle that may not even be economically viable for the league right now. It is a gamble of the highest order, and they are playing with other people's money. The next few weeks will reveal whether this is a brilliant negotiating tactic or a disastrous impasse. If the players genuinely won't accept a deal without 30% revenue sharing, and the owners genuinely won't offer more than 15%, then we are headed straight for a work stoppage. Stewart's right about one thing. This has gone on way longer than it needed to. But the reason it's dragged out isn't because the owners are being unreasonable. It's because the union leadership has drawn a line in the sand on an issue where the economics don't support their position, and they're refusing to compromise. The owners have moved on housing, on salaries, on facilities, on working conditions. The players have moved on nothing. So here is the question that should be dominating the conversation right now. What are the players willing to give up to get that revenue sharing percentage? Because negotiation, by definition, requires both sides to compromise. And so far, we have only seen one side doing that. If Breanna Stewart and the WNBPA leadership genuinely believe 30% revenue sharing is non-negotiable, they have a lot of explaining to do. They need to explain to players like Baylor Kelly why missing paychecks and potentially losing a season is worth fighting for that principle. They need to explain why guaranteed salary increases totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars per player aren't sufficient. Because right now, from the outside looking in, it appears the players driving these negotiations have alternative income sources that insulate them from the consequences of a lockout. And they're pursuing a maximalist strategy that puts the financial security of the majority of union members at risk. That is not leadership. That is self-interest disguised as solidarity. The clock is ticking louder every single day. The season is supposed to start in less than 3 months, and the gap between these two sides isn't narrowing, it's widening into a canyon. The question is whether it'll be the owners' resolve, the players' demands, or the 2025 WNBA season itself that finally breaks. What do you think? Are the players right to hold firm on revenue sharing, or are they overplaying their hand and risking a lockout that will hurt the very players they're supposed to represent? Drop your take in the comments, because this situation is about to reach a breaking point, and everyone involved needs to hear what the fans actually think about this mess.